Hello, everyone. A while back, I did an update with you guys in regards to quant spot reserves and why that's important. Well, this time around, in this particular update, it's Coinbase. It's what some of the whales are doing and so on. Say what you want. There's a lot of FUD when it comes to this long term hold and it being not one of the top performers out there. Again, QNT is, in fact, a long term hold. So when we talk about smart money, what is some of that smart money really truly doing? Again, this is an update. So stick around to the end of the outline. You're going to want to hear about that. And then on top of that, I have a little bit in regards to more of Bank of England. Yes, we talk about Bank of England quite a bit, but again, an update. So consider smashing like if you haven't done so already. Let's jump into the material and why it matters. So we will start things off from the one and only tokenizer. He did post this just a few days ago, and I did think, if anything, it was worth sharing with you guys. So here it is, straight from him. And what is he getting into right here? Well, as you can see when I full screen it, he talks specifically about Bank of England finding the answer for DLT interoperability long ago, as long as like back to 2021. Some of you guys have been into QNT longer than 2021, but no surprise about the QNT ties. Again, I want you guys to understand that when we talk about speculation and confirmation, a lot of times you see things in the past being mentioned, and some people are like, well, I didn't hear anything about that. Again, sometimes they're all tied up in NDAs, and then later on they get confirmed when it's time to go public. RTGS to interoperate with other ledgers. Clear that the answer that they found was all the way back in 2021, but at least caught tokenizer's eye that it's the highlight of CBDCs just below. What are we talking about? Well, it's a discussion of payment to payment settlement through Project Meridian. I've covered that in the past, many others as well. But FX with Banque de France, which is representing the Euro system. Never forget that Banque de France is the oversight committee for the Bank of International Settlements. Meridian is looking to interoperate with real-time gross settlements with DLT, in other words, legacy to DLT interoperability. Also important to keep in mind that back in 2021, the space was much less mature, and the technologies that talked about this level of interoperability were likely less than a handful. A lot of people point out, guys, when it comes to all this, there's this particular blockchain, Tezos, and there's Near, and I should say Tezos, but Near, and for example, they have interoperability. Quorum has interoperability, and all that's worth pulling out. But again, is it true interoperability as far as being blockchain agnostic? That's the bottom line. Do you have RTGS where you can settle on anything depending on the use case of what is being put out there for the transaction the time being? Like, is this used for trade? Obviously XDC. And we've seen numerous examples in regards to certain ones being picked for RTGS compared to others. Of course, last video I showed you the example of XRP. So just throwing that out there as well. Jumping back into the material, let's look at what we have here. And it's discussing a lot more than just the handful that we talked about. No coincidence that Quant is one of the pioneers. In the last video, I talked about Hedera, Quant, and the pioneers, people like Dr. Lehman Baird. But it's the biggest highlight of the mentioning of Project Agora, and I've done a few deep dives about that. I love this statement. More recent is the BIS, their projects, and the consensus amongst central banks is that this will be the biggest one yet. But how so? Love this statement as well. It's the inclusion of 7 central banks and the inclusion of the Institute for International Finance, the IIF. Says all you need to know about Agora Scale. And again, you can look more into that if you choose to nerd out. But when we talk about unified ledgers, RLN always gets brought up, does it not? So it's their approach by the BIS, which communicates via APIs across layers. I mean, say what you want. If you were to go to make.com, you can sign up for an account and play around with it yourself. If you're a person that even knows more of like the extensive coding and whatnot and how to piece it all together and more tech savvy, create your own type of transactions if you want, right? Make a mock-up of that. And if anything, you can appreciate how it really truly comes together. Things talking to each other. When Gilbert Verdin talks about silos and walled gardens, say what you want, you don't see those barriers anymore. And that's crucial moving forward for Web3. A little bit more from Tokenizer. He goes on to also mention that when you see Bank of England titling the Agora section as interoperating with global ledgers and those initiatives, it is a fitting title. One fact that some can argue is that the Bank of England is the most experienced within this lineup of central banks in Agora. After all, Project Rosalind itself brought a lot of the unified ledger inspiration. Some people feel as though the unified ledger basically is another way of saying the RLN. That's to be up for debate, but it does make sense when you see some of these highlights in that regard. What am I talking about? Let's view this on the other screen because you're going to see firsthand. So page 19 from this Bank of England PDF talks about that all the way back in 2017, the bank was the first G7 central bank to offer settlement accounts to non-bank payment service providers. And it was to do what? Promote access, competition, innovation. It was also followed in 2021 by a new access policy for omnibus accounts, which will enable real-time gross settlements to interoperate with emerging technologies and obviously distributed ledger technologies and new business models. As we get further down, it talks about, for example, the experiment to settle PvP FX transactions following real-time gross settlement systems, and of course, other jurisdictions. But what other jurisdictions? Well, it's through the BIS, everybody, and through the Innovation Hub, Meridian's FX project. As it states in the highlight, we are already conducting this experiment. That was back in 2021. And of course, synchronization and the Banque de France testing this using, for example, wholesale CBDC system. Again, Banque de France is oversight of the BIS. All right, what about a little bit more about this? Well, keep in mind, back in 2021, the BIS, through Project Agora, stated that they had, for example, 6 other central banks that would work with private banks to explore a unified global ledger on which multi-currency tokenized commercial bank deposits and central bank money can be exchanged on a single platform. Think about the single platform, the the RLN. What about a settlement platform? Right, the regulated liability, not just that network, but the regulated settlement network, the RSN. All right, let's jump into a little bit more of why this is important. So we're going to jump now to understanding what in the world is going on with what's on chain. Because let's face it, you guys have been waiting for this segment. So when you see things here from ChainStats, and of course Tokenizer, reposted this, but I also saw it as well. It's the stats that are on chain, QNT. What is going on in regards to like whales eyeballing QNT? Why are whales eyeballing QNT when it's so low? Well, think about it. They're whales. They want to accumulate when it's low, just like we do in the retail sector. So you have, for example, 80.675K QNT worth about $5 million at the time of this writing, grabbed from Kraken, at least in the last 5 hours. Now, keep in mind, not 5 hours. Well, I guess it is 5 hours as of today. I thought it was actually yesterday. So this is September 2nd. This is Val. This is today. Some of you guys want some of that newer news. But from Kraken, and of course, it shows which particular whale. And it also states that the whales total to 280.675K QNT, that comes out to be a whopping 17.44 million US dollars worth of QNT. What's your thought on this accumulation? And man, I mean, you can see what's going on with it, right? And especially from Kraken, but that whale taking in that amount of QNT, that's a lot. And that's, of course, in my opinion, a big deal, right? A little bit more about this, and of course, this is from Tokenizer. Let's jump into this. Here's the latest in regards to another quick QNT on-chain update, and I believe this one comes from the 28th, but still valid because you're seeing how this is all flowing, and I wanted to show you the Coinbase reference too. But basically, even though it's just a few days before that reporting from that particular ChainStats, keep in mind, tokenizer mentions that is bringing back exchange reserves. Again, following suit with the update of QNT spot reserves, exchange reserves, etc., etc. Simply put, exchange reserves equals total number of coins on exchange. We can see that spot reserves for QNT are basically at all-time low, but it is worth noting, like he mentioned in bold, only 225,000 QNT across all spot exchanges. That is low if you look at the overall amount of QNT. I mean, say what you want. The max supply QNT is 14.88 million QNT, and there's roughly about what, 81 to 82% that is in circulation. Factor in some of the recent Coinbase 10 QNT wallets, withdrawing more QNT to store away for years to come, and you really got the perfect storm. Again, think about this. You know, people that will say QNT is going to zero, they're not paying attention to this. They don't even know this. They're not even actually listening to the material. But exchange reserves depleting at this level isn't something we see with any other DLT project, and that right there, if you are a long-term holder of QNT, you know, nothing will FUD you out of that statement because it's what smart money is doing. Never forget that. Currently, we're looking at the 1-year chart for QNT's exchange reserves, and we can see that it's been continually trending downwards. But we're going to look at the batch transaction attached, and of course, I'll show that to you on the other screen here in a bit, make it a little bit bigger for you. But once again, obviously from Coinbase 10 and the wallets, they went to follow the same rules as usual. What rules? Well, 3 key highlights from Tokenizer. I love Tokenizer. He does a great job with his write-ups, and if anything, it saves me some time. Share it with you guys. So, number 1, only hold QNT, not even ETH to move it. Number 2, only get QNT from Coinbase 10. And number 3, does nothing with the tokens. That is worth pointing out. All right, a little bit more. Right out the bat, we see these transfers are absolutely massive in size. True. 4/5 transactions is well within the 6-figure or mid 6-figure range, with the other just slightly below $420,000 worth. Put all 5 of these together and we get a grand total of 42,300 QNT withdrawn in a single transaction. Now I want to state this. Shout out to Rue Black. We were talking about what Revolut was doing. They moved, I think it was roughly 52,000. So now you're getting into that area, right, of up there with Revolut. This is definitely worth pointing out. The next thing I want to get into. Current prices, this equates to 2.79 million worth of QNT being withdrawn from Coinbase in an instant. In an instant? That's a lot of money being moved. You have to really wonder why or how hard the market makers must be working to keep the prices down with transactions in this quantity taking place. There's going to be a lot of theories, and we're going to see them in the comments on both X and YouTube. But keep in mind, with these large withdrawals, there's no wonder why the total spot reserves of QNT is depleting so rapidly. Wrap your mind around that. Don't just take what is on the surface. All right, in the end, what's the best part? We don't have to worry about any form of dumping from those walls. Now, people will disagree. If we had a massive crash, you believe that the price will tank. There's a difference between price tanking in the market, because, you know, BTC and Ethereum represent 81% of that market, and there's a difference between dumping from the wallets. So I just want to state that. All right, why are we pointing this out? Or why is Tokenizer pointing it out? Proven to never move. They have already seen how some of these walls have been dormant for over 600 days, but activity is taking place as the market's stagnant. Just imagine what happens when there's an influx of retail demand that kicks in. And here's an example. With everything from the UK's Regulated Liability Network, Agora, and also EJPY, eShekel, Meridian FX, and more happening, it really seems that on-chain activity is coinciding with fundamental development, and that is definitely worth pointing out. Here's the next page to blow it up, and here we see exchange reserves of QNT supply. And as we get into it, you see, just like he was mentioning, specifically in regards to QNT, because you see, for example, those 5 transactions of an insane amount of QNT. all from that Coinbase 10. So it's definitely worth pointing out. All right. Last but not least, in conclusion, why does this really truly matter for all of you? Well, from what I've gathered, it's basically this in my own notes that I want to talk about. Because sometimes we look at some of these things, some of these figures, and don't realize it's like, didn't realize what's really, really going on. And if anything, this is something I do. So, what I want to point out is this before we wrap things up. We have to discuss a little bit more of the significance. Basically, the breakdown of key points, and let's face it, some of the potential impact of things that could come moving forward. So, low exchange reserves, talked about before a few months back, but basically, are these exchange reserves at all-time low? And if so, does that mean that there would be fewer QNT tokens readily available for trading on exchanges? Well, we already saw that. Tokenizer did an excellent job of showing that basically about 250,000, give or take, just round that off. That's significantly low when you look at other particular projects, whether they hold coins or tokens, right? But what are some of the factors that are involved? Well, keep in mind, investors holding QNT for the long term and moving them off exchanges for safekeeping are definitely a factor. And Coinbase 10 wallets, as you guys saw in the example from Tokenizer, they are definitely known for holding only QNT and not actively trading or withdrawing large amounts of QNT. So it's like, what are they doing then? Again, it's how they position themselves for the future. They could have just dumped it all. They could have just sold it all, but they're not doing that. All right. Would there be a potential impact in regards to everything? Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I could look at things just as much as the next guy and understand that, yeah, there could be potential impact and there could be potential reduced liquidity, but lower exchange reserves in themselves could very well decrease the ease and speed of buying and selling QNT. That would play a factor towards the market makers, but it would potentially impact, of course, price volatility. Is that what we want to see? That's a double-edged sword in itself, but we all want to see price increase. Some of us don't want to see it low for we can accumulate more, and I get what you're saying on that. But with fewer QNT available, of course, on exchanges, there would be buying pressure, and that could, of course, push the price up if demand remains steady. Do you agree with that statement? Let me know in the comments. But back to the topic again about the market maker. There would be a challenge for the market makers. How so? Well, it's basically large withdrawals, of course, make it harder for market makers to keep the price stable. I mean, that's always been a thing and a challenge for them. But this is QNT. All right, moving forward, is there any positive outlook? Sometimes you guys just want some of the good news, but keep in mind, QNT is not likely to be dumped because the wallets have been active for a long time. And of course, some of the screenshots that Tokenizer shared and so on, I think even Mine Crypto, some other people have been sharing it. And of course, what's on ChainStats have been sharing that as well. So that's worth pointing out. And of course, some of the other things mentioned in regards to RLN, Project Agora, and so on. But my thing is this: everything that's been presented to you guys tonight, or I should say tonight, this evening, right? It's still daylight outside, at least for me, time difference, right? But it's what could potentially increase the demand, of course, for QNT, further impacting, of course, its price. Which brings us to the last segment, and that is this: would we see a significant amount of like these exchange reserves continuously run low, and would it be a sign of bullish sentiment? Excuse me, some of you guys criticize me on that. It's okay. But would it provide some of that bullish sentiment for QNT with investors holding for the long term? I mean, not just investors like you and me in retail, but the smart big money. And I don't mean that by any offense, but let's face it, most of us cannot afford to buy 50,000 QNT, right? So reduced liquidity, would it lead to short-term price volatility? Could very well be a thing, but I think in the end, let's face it, everybody, is definitely worth, as the saying goes, pointing out, because We want to follow what smart money does, and watching particular wallets, specifically Coinbase 10 and what they're doing, say what you want, they may very well know what they hold. They've already done the research because the research trumps FUD 110%. Thanks for tuning in. Not that big of a deep dive today. We'll see you on the next one. Some of you guys ask what cold storage solution I use. I use this, and it is the Decent wallet. All right. I also, of course, have a ledger like this. All right. You can get a discount basically from going into the affiliate link, which is in all the live video descriptions and recorded and so on. And for the yahoos that are out there, they're like, this is just a shield. And, we'll fix point this out. And it's a great point. Were you aware that you don't necessarily get a discount link just going straight to the site? No, you actually have to go through a platform like this. So how cool is that? I don't think anybody's complaining about that. But anyway, use the link, get a discount. There's another one here. If you're the type of person you want to get one for you and your significant other, you can get two of them. They actually have another promotion, which is this, and I think this is cool. You can get an all-in-one card wallet plus backup card package. Interesting. I thought that was cool. And again, one of the main key things I like about the Decent wallet is not having to do the red tape of jumping through all the hoops for XDC and the custom folder. I mean, Edward Vincent can vouch on that. Some of you guys can too as well in regards to ledger. That was a pain in the butt. You don't have that problem. You literally open up your phone, it's on your app, track everything that's going on, right? And saying goes, not your keys, not your crypto. You know the drill. Check it all out though if you wish to do so. It is truly the cold storage solution that I use for the most part. There's still some on ledger that I kind of split it up on it and so on. So it is what it is. But if I have preference over one, I'm going with this one. A lot easier to use and so on. And some people, even to this day, still ask me which one to use.